Hey everyone, welcome back to Raimi Works 360. There are almost certain things that happen in the Army that, if you've ever served, are almost impossible to explain. You can tell the story, you can show somebody pictures, you can even try to explain the logic behind it, and they'll still look at you and say, why the hell would anybody do that? And sometimes, you don't have an answer. Take, for example, mopping an asphalt motor pool in the pouring rain. Now, obviously, this story didn't start with a mop, so let's go back a couple hours. It was about 9:30 in the morning at Fort Lewis, Washington. The sky had that familiar Pacific Northwest color. Not really gray, not really black, just that heavy, miserable shade that tells you the sun has absolutely no intention of showing up that day. We were standing outside the company area when I felt the first cold drop of rain hit the back of my neck. Then another. I looked up at the sky, looked down at the motor pool, and sighed. Ah, fuck. Because this wasn't just another maintenance day. We were getting a new company commander, and anybody who has been around the Army long enough knows exactly what that means. Change of command inventories. Every piece of equipment signed to that company had to be accounted for before the incoming commander signed his name saying, yep, all this is mine now. And when I say everything, I mean everything. Every vehicle, every radio, every tool, every piece of basic issue item equipment. Every stupid little piece of Army property somebody somewhere had decided needed a serial number, hand receipt, or a line in a property book. And today, it was our striker's turn. Before heading down to the motor pool, we made what was probably going to be the best decision we'd make all day. We stopped at the shopette. Hot coffee, French vanilla. It was one of the cups that was way too hot to drink at first, but somehow was ice cold 30 minutes later. At the time though, it felt perfect. I had the thing like it was my life support, because I already knew what was waiting for us. We got down to the motor pool, unlocked the Connex, opened up the striker, and started dragging everything out. First came the tarp. That big green Army tarp went down next to the truck. Then we started pulling out all the equipment signed to HHC 67. Stowage bags, Pioneer tools, tow equipment, headlight covers, vehicle accessories, toolkits, anything and everything that belonged to that striker. And none of it could just be thrown into the tarp. Oh no. That would have been too easy. We had a book. Some units called it the BII book. Some guys just called it the picture book. Basically, somebody had taken pictures showing exactly how everything was supposed to be laid out. And if that picture showed a shovel at a 45-degree angle, well, congratulations, your shovel was going to be at a 45-degree angle. Not really. So we started building what might be the world's least exciting art exhibit. One bag here, another bag beside it, tools lined up, equipment grouped together, everything facing the same direction, because eventually somebody with a clipboard was going to walk by, look at the picture, look at our tarp, and start counting. And by then, the rain had stopped pretending. It was coming down hard. At first, you tell yourself you're going to stay dry. You pull your collar up, maybe throw on your wet weather top, trying to avoid stepping in the puddles. That lasts about 20 minutes. Eventually, there's a point where you realize you're completely soaked anyways, and you just stop caring. The water was already working its way through my uniform. My sleeves were wet, my patrol cap was wet, my gloves, and every couple steps I could feel the water sloshing around inside my boots. I bent over to put another stowage bag onto the tarp, and that's when I felt it. One single cold droplet straight down the back of my neck, down my spine, and eventually right down the crack of my ass. If you've ever experienced that before, You know, there's a very specific facial expression that comes with it. There's no military training that prepares you for that moment. You stand there for a second questioning every decision you've ever made up to that moment. At least I still had my coffee. I picked it up, took a drink. The smell of French vanilla almost made the situation better. Almost. Let's introduce Private First Class Miller. Miller had been at the company for about 6 months. Young guy, about 19 or 20, still new enough to the Army that he actually tried to do everything correctly. You remember that stage, before you've learned that sometimes the Army doesn't actually want you to solve the problem, it just wants you to participate in the problem. Miller was a good soldier. Worked hard, didn't complain much, but he had one weakness. He had an incredible ability to lose things. Not important things, at least not usually, just things. A glove, notebook, his pen, maybe an ID, a wrench he had been holding onto for 30 seconds prior. You could hand Miller something, turn around, turn back, and somehow that object had entered into another dimension. Which brings us to about lunchtime. By then, most of the layout was complete. Our tarp was covered, everything was wet, we were wet, the equipment was wet. The picture book itself was starting to look like it had been recovered from the bottom of the Puget Sound, but we were getting close. Our squad leader walked down the line with the book, one item at a time. Got it, got it, got it. You look at the picture, look at the tarp, make a mark, move on. And then he stopped. That's never good. He looked at the book, looked at the tarp, looked back at the book, then he pointed. Where's the other one? Everyone looked down. There was an empty space. A piece of equipment was missing. A blackout headlight cover. Not a radio, not a weapon. Not some $1 million piece of equipment, but a headlight cover. But if you've ever done an Army inventory, you already know that doesn't matter. Missing is missing, and suddenly the entire layout stopped. Someone asked who had it last. Another guy said he thought it was inside the striker. Someone else remembered seeing it in the Connex. And then somebody made the mistake of saying, I think Miller had it. Every head slowly turned toward Miller. Miller froze. You could actually see his brain searching through the previous 24 hours. I put it with the other one, Sergeant. Then back at the empty spot. I swear. For about 3 seconds, that empty square on the tarp became the most important piece of real estate at Fort Lewis. So the search began. First the tarp, everything moved, everything checked, nothing. Then the striker, every compartment open, every storage area searched, seats lifted, bags moved, nothing. Then the Connex. If you've never searched an Army Connex for a specific item, well, imagine somebody taking everything you own, stuffing it inside a metal box, turning off the lights, and then asking you to find a television remote. For the asphalt, I decided to add a little bit of texture here. That way, it didn't appear to be so flat. We pulled out boxes, moved tools, checked shelves, nothing. Meanwhile, the rain just kept coming, and every minute we spent looking meant every minute the layout sat outside getting wetter. Eventually, the squad leader had enough. He stood outside the Connex staring at Miller. Miller was soaked, water dripping off the brim of his patrol cap, and the sergeant finally said, Miller, go get a mop. There was a pause. Miller looked around, at the sky, at the rain, at the asphalt, then back at the sergeant. Mop, Sergeant? Did I stutter? No, Sergeant. A few minutes later, Miller came walking across the mortar pool, pushing a bright yellow mop bucket. And I don't think I've ever seen a man look so defeated. He stopped in front of the sergeant. The sergeant pointed at the pavement. Start mopping. Miller looked down at the water flowing across the asphalt, then looked back up. For half a second, you could see the question forming in his head. It's raining. Thankfully, Miller still had enough survival instinct not to say it. He just grabbed the mop, dropped it onto the pavement, and started pushing water through more water. And that's the moment for this diorama is based around, because somewhere in the army, at some point, some poor private has absolutely found himself doing something just as ridiculous. The rain is pouring, everybody's miserable, there's thousands of pounds of equipment sitting on a tarp getting soaked. And 15 feet away, there's one guy mopping in the motor pool. Every pass of the mop pushed a thin layer of water, maybe 2 feet, and within seconds, the rain filled it right back in. It was completely pointless, which somehow made it even funnier. Every once in a while, Miller would stop, lean against the mop, look at the sky, then he'd see the sergeant watching him and immediately start mopping again. Nobody said anything, but everybody noticed. And every time somebody walked past him, you could see them trying not to smile, because there's an unwritten rule in the army. When something's terrible is happening to you, it's miserable. When it's happening to your buddy, it's hilarious. Eventually, we finished the inventory, or at least almost finished it. There was still that missing headlight cover, so we started packing everything up. All those beautiful rows we'd spent hours creating, gone. Everything went back into the bags, the tarps got folded, tools went back into the storage, and all the soaking wet equipment went straight back into the Connex. Which, if you can imagine, is another piece of beautiful Army logic. Because we all knew exactly what was going to happen. The next sunny day, we'd pull all of it right back out again, just so it could dry. Hours of work to undo the work we had just done. And then of course, we would just pack it up again. Efficiency, right? And this is where Miller's day gets even better. One of the guys grabbed one of the storage bags off the tarp. He lifted it and something fell out. Bloop! Everybody stopped. Sitting there on the wet asphalt was the missing headlight cover. Apparently, it had gotten tucked underneath one of the bags when we first started laying everything out. Miller hadn't lost it. It had just been there the entire time. The sergeant looked at the headlight cover, then looked across the motor pool. Miller was still mopping. He looked back at the headlight cover, then back at Miller. There was this long pause, and finally somebody asked, "You gonna tell him, Sergeant?" The sergeant thought about it for a second and then said, "Nah, playa. Maybe eventually." Also, I wanted to give a quick shout out to Solomon over at 11 Charlie Scale Modeling for helping me bring this scene to life. He printed me the custom mopping soldier, the mop bucket for me, and without these pieces, this idea wouldn't have come together the way it did. So if you're looking for awesome custom military figures or unique diorama accessories, definitely go check him out. And that is probably the most Army ending this story could possibly have. I don't remember every equipment layout I ever did. Honestly, most of them blend together. Cold mornings, wet uniforms, clipboards, missing equipment, Connexes full of stuff nobody wanted to unpack. But I remember the feeling, standing in the motor pool at Fort Lewis, rain coming down, boots full of water, a cold cup of coffee sitting somewhere nearby, and wondering how something could be so completely miserable, and somehow still become one of those stories you laugh about years later. And with that, the scene is finally finished. For the final reveal, I wanted everything to feel cold, wet, and miserable, exactly how I remember those rainy days at Fort Lewis. Since this was my first time creating a completely wet diorama, most of this was a little bit of an experiment. Once everything was painted and weathered, I sprayed the entire scene with a gloss varnish. Normally, I try to control exactly where the shine goes, but for this one, I wanted the asphalt, the equipment, the tarp, and even the figure to all feel like they'd been sitting out in the rain for hours. After that, I started building up the puddles across the motor pool. I tried to keep them different sizes and shapes instead of making them all too uniform, because water is always going to settle differently across a rough asphalt. Hopefully, all these little details make the scene feel like a real striker layout instead of just a figure standing in a puddle. Again, this was my first real attempt at creating a wet scene like this, so definitely let me know down in the comments how you think I did. And if you've worked with wet effects before, let me know what I could do differently or improve the next time I try something like this. Now, before I go, I genuinely want to thank you guys for all the support. Out of everything you could have been doing today, you chose to spend the last 15 minutes here with me, watching me build a tiny piece of Army stupidity, and I really do appreciate that. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, subscribe, and if you haven't already, join me for the next upcoming build. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.